Alrighty then, it looks like the instant state shows as running, the status check shows as 2 out of 2 checks passed. We're ready to go. So if I were to put a check mark in the box to the left of my Amazon Linux 1 instance, here I've got the public IP address, which I will go ahead and copy. I'll click the copy icon. And here on my local computer, I've downloaded and installed the free PuTTY tool, which allows me to make remote connections such as over TCP port 22 for remote SSH management of Linux. What I've done here is I've created an Amazon Linux 1 saved session by typing in the name. I specified the public IP address that I copied from the console. Also on the left under window appearance, I increased the font size to 18 point. I could actually change that to 20, so it's just a little bit larger and more legible. And on the left under connection SSH, if I click off, this is where I can specify my private key from my key pair that was specified when the instance was launched. You might recall that I specified a key pair called key pair 1, public key portion which is stored in the cloud, and the private key portion which is stored in this file that I'm specifying here. It's important that that be specified because that's the default authentication type, SSH public key authentication. So I'm just going to go back to session here on the left here in PuTTY, and I'm just going to save my Amazon Linux 1 changes, and I'm going to go ahead and click open to open a session to it. Now, because it's the first time I've connected, I get this PuTTY security alert, which in essence is saying, do you trust this host? Are you sure you know which host you're connecting to? And it provides the unique fingerprint for that host from the server's SSH key. That's fine. I do accept this. So I'm going to click accept, and I won't be prompted for that again on this machine. Amazon Linux, when you deploy an instance from that image, uses ec2-user as the default username. I'll press enter, and it doesn't ask me for a password because I've got the related private key. It knows the public key, and so it let me in. Now, of course, at this point, I could create additional user accounts or do whatever I normally would want to do in Linux. But what we want to do here is verify that the CLI is pre-installed. That's the whole point of this. If I were to run AWS -- version, this is it. It knows that we've got the CLI is here. Now, if I want to make sure I have the newest version of the CLI, which is always important, so my current version is showing here as 1.18.147. Well, here, I'm going to use the curl command, and I'll specify the URL for the CLI on the AmazonAWS.com site. Specifically, it's going to be CLI version 2. So I'm going to bring down that zip file in the current directory on this machine. It's pretty small. If I do an ls, there it is, the zip file. So I'm going to run sudo because I need to run this as an elevated privileged user. Unzip./AWS. I'll use tab completion to spell out the rest of that file name, and it's inflating or extracting all of those files for the installer. If I clear the screen with clear and do an ls, there's an AWS directory. I'll change directory into it. And there we've got our installer. So sudo // for current directory, and the script is called install. So if we were now to run AWS -- version as we did initially when we got in here, notice now we've updated the CLI to version 2.7.18. Always important to run the latest version to make sure you're taking advantage of the latest features and latest command set parameters. And then from here, I can run AWS configure to authenticate by specifying the access key. So I've got a root key CSV file I downloaded when I created my access key in the console. So I'm going to go ahead and copy the access key value. I'll go ahead and paste that in. It wants the secret key. No problem. I can get that. Back here in my root key file, I'll copy the secret key value, and I'll paste that in here. The default region I would like to specify is US-East-1. Default output format, enter. OK. And to test that we can access resources in our AWS account from the CLI, I'll just run AWS S3 API list-buckets. I just want a list of S3 buckets, but I've added some client-side filtering here with -- query. I just want the bucket's name. So I want the name property only. When I press enter, there it is. We've got our list of buckets, which proves that we are authenticated here in the CLI, which we've updated, by the way, in our Amazon Linux EC2 instance.